Welcome. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. Hi, Masako and Joni. Joyful Joni. I love that. Lee. Hello. Sonia, Karen. So glad everyone's here. Thanks for joining us for Conscious Conversations, which is hosted by CSL's virtual practitioner program. It's just such a neat time to gather, and I'm so pleased that Karen, one of our wonderful practitioners, is going to be presenting today. And the focus of these conscious conversations is ancient wisdom for modern times. So we're so glad you're here, and I'll open us in a little bit of prayer, and then I'll hand it over to Karen. So if it's comfortable for you to close your eyes or soften your gaze, and just take a deep breath in and release it. When we breathe, we have the opportunity to feel life coming into us, expanding our belly, animating our fingers and our toes, going to our brain. We're connected to everything around us. And the whole world is God, is spirit, is love. And we're part of it too, and we emanate that too. And it's a beautiful thing. It's our birthright. It's all of our birthright. Every person around the world, every living thing. So I know for our time today, flow and sweetness and learning and connection and deepening. And so with great gratitude for our presenter, Karen, with great gratitude for every person here, I just release this, knowing that our time together is really lovely, really blessed. And so it is. Amen.
And so it is.
And so it is. Thank you. Thank you for being here. I am going to share screen. And slideshow. Did I need to put slideshow first? Can you see that as a slideshow?
Yes, it looks
Yes.
great, Karen. It looks great.
Okay. Okay, so today's presentation will be about light, whether it is a metaphor or a reality, a Western scientific reality, or if it's just a metaphor. We're going to talk about light as a science, as how we perceive it, how we experience it, the myths and the symbolism. So first, before we can even understand the question, we have to ask ourselves, what is science? Science studies the world using the scientific method. The scientific method involves observing. It's a very systematic approach. And we probably use it in our daily lives. We observe something, we make a hypothesis, and we experiment and make conclusions from that experiment. This is the scientific method, and this is what religious science is based on. This observation, hypothesis, experimenting, and drawing conclusions from that experimentation. Western science is something different. It's limited to the physical world. It's based in materialism, the belief that only the physical world exists, only the physical realm exists. Even consciousness, it comes from the brain. It's not something of its own. It's not something invisible. So in this presentation, we'll talk about the difference between these two, and if light as a metaphor can be explained by Western science. So first of all, what is light? It's an electromagnetic wave. And what does that mean? It means an electric field and a magnetic field are oscillating in any type of medium. It can be a vacuum. It doesn't need a medium like sound. Sound needs to be in air. Electromagnetic waves, they propagate no matter what. The electric field reinforces the magnetic field reinforces the electric field, and they go along until they hit the eye. And when they hit the eye, we have only a small amount that we actually see. There's gamma rays used in cancer treatment. Those are the very, very short waves on the order of a trillionth of a yard, of a meter. They're very, very short waves. X-rays are used in medical treatments, ultraviolet in sterilization, infrared in some types of communication, microwave in cooking, and then the radio waves. They're used in broadcasting. And yet the amount that we can see is just this small, small portion. How we see is this electric magnetic waves comes into our eye, and you may remember this from grade school. It flips upside down on the back of our retina, and then somehow the brain flips it right side up, and interprets it, identifies it, and all of this happens in an instant. Oops. We also see by cones and color. We also see color. There's 3 types of cones, green, blue, and red. And different combinations of this makes the perception of color. We also see shadows and values. These shadows and values distinguish things from another. If there were no shadows, what could we see? If there were no colors, we would see everything as just one thing. And then we interpret it. And of course, everybody knows how interpretations can be different. What I see may be something different than you see. That's because the brain can't possibly take in everything we see, so it fills things in. So can we trust our eyes? Now that is the Western science perspective of light. When we start talking about experiencing light, we're talking about, we're veering away from Western science, because if I experience light, that doesn't necessarily mean that you do. The criteria for evidence for Western science is that it's measurable, predictable, and objective. Subjectivity is not considered to be valid evidence in Western science. So the experience of light, A Course in Miracles has a really interesting perspective on light. It calls visual seeing image making. This is not seeing, it says. Image making takes the place of seeing. In other words, we rely on visual sight, not on our spiritual sight. It goes on, but you will begin to understand it when you have seen little edges of light around the same familiar objects which you see now. As we go along, you may have many light episodes. So is this light episode something we see with the physical eyes? If not, what is it? Kirlian photography at one time was thought to show aura. Kirlian photography actually shows little lights, a border of lights around things that scientists believe is caused by moisture interacting with the electric field. Religious figures depicted in art often have light surrounding them. And is this light a consequence of our wholeness? If there's nothing hidden, if everything is known, if there's no barriers, no shadows, are we left with light? Apologize. So here's a picture of Kirlian photography with the little rims of light around it, and a depiction of Jesus with the light that I was speaking about that's often around depictions of religious figures. The final thing that we'll talk about in this section is the two creations of light in the Bible. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. This is the first creation. He saw that light that was good separated the light from the darkness, called the light day and the darkness night. So then on the fourth day, God made two great lights, the greater light to govern the day and the lesser light to govern the night. He also made the stars. So this also separated the light from the darkness. What was the second creation? What was this first creation? Kabbalah is a Jewish mysticism that emerged in the 12th century. It is thought by some Kabbalists that the light on day one was only around for a week or so that Adam and Eve could see. In the Zohar, the sacred text of Kabbalah, two rabbis are discussing this light. Was this light removed or was it hidden? The first rabbi says it was removed. The second rabbi says, no, it was hidden. If it were removed, the world would disintegrate. Shadows are needed to make distinctions. Light by itself doesn't create. Divine light is always circulating and animating existence. One ray of light shines into the world and keeps creation going. It's the light going through the process of concealment that creates, not the light. This rhythm of appearance and concealment produces manifest reality. So how does this story speak to you? Or does it? Does it say anything about your life? Does it intrigue you? Any ideas? Thank you. Thank you, Sonia. Yes, feel free to share. I my pop-ups on my chats, the pop-ups don't work,
Well,
so I don't see. Yes.
I was trying to raise my hand and raise the wrong icon instead. But what it does say is that everything has that light, made of that light. At least that's what I heard in your presentation, that everything is made of light and is light.
Mm-hmm. That would be the implication, wouldn't it?
Yeah, light is always there. Sometimes we make it cloudy, but the light is always there. And that there's no limitation. I was just in the ending of an Upanishad study group, and they were talking about, like the sun that's out. You can have the sun come into your house, but you don't have all the sun in your house. You're not taking it all up yourself. There's plenty to go around, and it's always there. And the same way that light is inside of us, it's always there. And it doesn't matter how many of us are letting our love light shine. It doesn't take away from anybody else.
And the filtering is absolutely necessity, according to Kabbalah, the filtering of the light, the shadowing. Okay, so we'll get back to this share. Sure, why my phone is doing this thing. Let me have to get rid of- So there are a lot of myths about light. And naturally, the sun gods, excuse me, naturally, the sun gods have been worshipped and revered throughout history because they give light. The sun gives light, life, and warmth. Some of the sun gods include Hinduism, Surya, Egyptian Ra, Shinto's Amaterasu. In Egypt, Ra is the sun god. He's carried across the sky by a boat. And in the evening, he goes to the underworld and fights challenges and chaos. Amaterasu is another sun god of Japanese Shinto. The story goes that one day Amaterasu was fed up with her brothers, and she decided to hide herself in a cave. Therefore, I am sorry, I have to get my dog out. Okay, so Amaterasu was fed up with her brother's mischievous behavior, so she hid in a cave, throwing the world into darkness. And some of the gods and goddesses hatched a plan. They had a festival. They were going to lure her out of the cave with a festival with music and dancing. So the festival went on, and Amaterasu was curious. She came out of the cave, and light was restored to the world. Celebrations, there's numerous celebrations of light all around the world. Hinduism's Diwali lasts for 5 days. It involves sweets, fireworks, candle lighting. It symbolizes the triumph of light over darkness, of good over evil, of righteousness over evil, of righteousness over evil. Judaism's Hanukkah lasts for 8 days, and it is to commemorate the second temple, the rededication of the second temple, and the miracle of the oil. Oil that was only supposed to burn 1 day, burned 8 days. And that is why Hanukkah lasts for 8 days. Another celebration is the winter solstice, celebrating the return to light, return of the dark of the sunlight. The summer solstice celebrates the summer, celebrates the sun. And then there's the story of Moses in the burning bush. Moses was tending his sheep when he came upon a bush that was burning, but it wasn't consuming the bush. As he approached, he heard a voice that identified itself as the God of Isaac, Jacob, and Abraham. This God said that he'd heard the cries of the Hebrew people, and he had come to free them from enslavement. And Moses was the one to lead them out of bondage and into the promised land. Moses asked him, "What is your name?" God answered, "I am what I am. I am." He told him to remove his sandals because he is standing on holy ground. Fire is frequently a symbol of divine presence in Judaism, in the Hebrew Bible. So next we'll talk about Zoroastrianism. It was founded in 700 BCE, around 700 BCE in Persia by a man named Zarathustra. His westernized name is Zoroastra. He was 30 when he had a vision of a cosmic battle between light and darkness, righteousness and evil in the world. He saw that the God, the righteous, the pure, the good God that can be no evil at all, that he called Ahura Mazda, the high God, above and beyond the old gods. Now, Zarathustra was likely a polytheist. So to say there was a high God is really a change in religious thought. Ahura Mazda is locked in eternal struggle against Ahriman or Angra Mainya, the evil spirit called the lie, and his demons, his devas. So throughout history, Ahura Mazda gains an edge, and then Ahriman gains an edge, and they go back and forth and back and forth. So the features of Zoroastrianism, a big feature of Zoroastrianism is this idea of light and dark, of the good and evil symbolism. It also is one of the first to introduce eschatology, the end times, the idea that the world will end someday, God will judge it, and the concept of paradise was largely emphasized in Zoroastrianism. Today, there are only around 120,000 practitioners of Zoroastrianism. Zoroastrianism also features a sacred fire called an attar that is burning continuously in the Zoroastrian temples. This light, this fire represents purity and goodness and is always tended by the monks in the temple. Zoroastrianism has had an enormous influence on the evolution and the development of religion. John's gospel appears to be highly influenced by Zoroastrianism? Of course, we cannot know, but it has many features of Zoroastrianism. On the last day, remember this is an eschatological religion, Ahura Mazda defeats Ahriman, good, gets an edge. Ahriman and all traces of evil are extinguished. The earth is purified and restored to its perfect state. The dead will be resurrected, either to live in the house of song, this place of eternal joy and bliss, of eternal presence with Ahura Mazda, or in a temporary place called the House of Lies. This isn't a place of punishment. This is a place of redemption, of rehabilitation, where souls get a choice to choose goodness over evil. Some interpretations claim Ahura Mazda made this world as a trap for Ahriman. Humans are his masterpiece, and he had faith that we would choose for Ahriman, and Ahriman is weakened by our choices. Ahriman wants to overcome us, but he is weakened by our choices for good. So humans are the bait. It's an interesting perspective. So the role of humans is very similar to what non-dual thought believes. At birth, we have this divine spark. And this divine spark they call Asha. And it continuously seeks to reunite with Ahura Mazda using principles of truth, justice, and righteousness. 4 days after death, souls cross into the Chinvat bridge to the unseen world and await judgment. And like I said, they go either to the House of Lies temporarily, or the Dark House, or the House of Song. Apparently I wrote it twice, okay. So, sun gods, light celebrations, Moses' encounter with the divine light, Zoroastrianism. How do these stories enhance your understanding of reality and your part in it? Is there a symbol in these stories that resonates?
I love this presentation, Karen. Thank you so much. Yeah, the metaphor of light is really a powerful one, and the metaphor of darkness. I think what was striking me, I was writing in the chat, is how similar Zoroastrianism is to Christianity, like you brought up, especially in the Gospel of John, and how, Christianity, so much of the base of it is Zoroastrianism, which is not commonly discussed, even though we live in statistically a largely Christian nation in the United States, and many nations are largely Christian. So yeah, no, it's fascinating. I think in terms of the symbology, I think the ebb and flow of light, like the high light and the low light, like the day and the night, is very powerful for me, because I think it speaks to the seasonality of our experience, of our emotions, of our beliefs, of our kind of lived experience in life, that we go through times of like high light and low light, and that's really a very powerful thing, and that's mirrored in like the literal way that we experience light in the world. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Rebecca.
Karen, I have to echo what Rebecca said, because I'm loving this presentation. I also put it in the chat that I'm loving this presentation.
Oh, thank you.
It just took me way back into my years of studying Christian theology, because a lot of that information, Zoroastrian, Ahura Mazda, a lot of that is taught in Old Testament history, The unfortunate thing is that traditional churches don't bring that out to the general public. This is information you'll get when you go into the college and you study. But I can see and I want to use the word syncretism because that's where Christianity originated, from a syncretism of all those Hellenistic religions. You pull a piece from here and a piece from there, and you just bring all together under the name of Christianity. But today, most churches do not give credit to these ancient teachings that have more or less been the foundation of the Christian teaching. And I'm really grateful for you to bringing this out. And I'm hoping that it doesn't just, this conversation about the light and the history behind it doesn't just end with the conversation here today, but that we're able to take it a little wider throughout CSL and maybe beyond CSL, because this is really valuable information. I want to say again, thank you for bringing this up.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Thank you so much.
And I wanted to make a more general observation about the topic of light as a metaphor. And Karen, I'm going to go back to one of the slides you showed near the beginning of your presentation, where you showed the electromagnetic spectrum and where visible light appears on that spectrum. And as you mentioned, visible light is just a very small portion of all the electromagnetic energy that surrounds us at all times. But the only difference between visible light as opposed to gamma rays or X-rays or microwaves or radio waves is that those are the only ones that we can see with our eyes. And to me, it's an interesting observation to see how often light appears as a metaphor in religion and spirituality, but it's the only part of the electromagnetic spectrum that you can see. And to me, it speaks to us as humans, how we tend to gravitate, both scientists and non-scientists, we gravitate towards those things that we can see, and as opposed to the things that are around us at all times, but we can't see. We don't put nearly as much emphasis on those as we do the ones that we can sense with our own eyes. And again, I can't draw any conclusions from this, but just wanted to make that observation.
Thank you. It's really quite a miracle that we can see the whole process is so precise. It's really quite amazing. Yet we're not interacting with what we see directly. It's mediated by light. It's mediated by electromagnetic waves in our eyes, in our interpretation, which I think is really fascinating. So thank you. Masako.
Thank you. Okay, well, I want to extend on this whole idea of metaphor. And so I got a little lost in all the past religious ideas. So the way that I sort of welcome the world is, how does that pertain to my life right now? And so what I gathered, what came up for me is in art, they use the color white as the background. And the purpose of that is so that things coming in and out of the white background can shine. So it is actually the star. The other example is of the rainbow. We need the sun to reflect on those, the water droplets that has our eyes see colors, right? And there's, as what was shown by you brilliantly, there's so many colors and so many things that's out there, and we only see fragments of it. And again, just like the white background, that light is really pointing at something. Okay, it's not the answer, but it's a pointer. And same idea goes to the idea of the darkness and the light. For me, we need that comparison in order to appreciate one from the other, not necessarily to make judgments by, oh, the light is good and the darkness is bad, but it's for our personal growth in comparing our differences.
That's pretty much what Kabbalah is saying too. So we need this darkness to create. We need the shadows. Anyone else, or should I go into the last section? Okay, in the last section, we'll get back into a little bit of science, but it's not really science. I think it's much better understood as a metaphor. This is not accepted by the scientific community, but it is a really, really interesting metaphor. Arthur Young, he lived around the turn of the century. I believe he died in the 70s sometime. He was a helicopter engineer and a British inventor. He's written a number of books. He had a theory of process, a reflexive art, that is about evolution. It's about the descent and ascent into matter. He makes two assumptions: that everything is conscious and that the universe began with a photon's intention. Now, really, according to the Big Bang Theory, light was here from the beginning, but the universe wasn't cool enough or transparent enough to see it for another 380,000 years. It appears as background microwave radiation now. So light appeared at some point 3.5 billion years after the Big Bang. And it changed through evolution's random mutations, natural selection, and then somehow, according to Western science, consciousness was sort of squirted out from the brain. Consciousness, according to Western science, is an epiphenomenon of the brain. It's physical too. So Arthur Young, in his theory, in his hypothesis, it's more of a hypothesis because theories are accepted. In his hypothesis, he proposes everything is conscious. Now, this is the perspective of panpsychism, that matter and mind, that the invisible world and the physical world are two sides of the same coin, that everything is conscious because mind and matter always go together. Because everything is conscious, in his perspective of panpsychism, a photon can have intention. So Young tells us, he proposes the universe began with a photon's intention. Now remember, this is not Western science at all, because Western science doesn't give us choice exactly. It's all neurochemicals. It's all because of the brain. Consciousness did not emerge at the beginning of life, at the beginning of the universe. Young proposes that the universe began with a photon. That at first the photon was all there was in the universe. And this sort of makes sense. And this is where I like the analogy. A photon is both a particle and a wave, or it's actually something in between the two. What is a particle? It's something that you can point to. It's localized in space. It has no dimension. You can point to it and say, there it is. A wave never ends. It's spread out into space. So a photon for a creator makes an odd sort of sense because it is one particle, one localized being, as well as something that inhabits the whole universe. He goes on saying, since it includes everything, since it's a wave, the photon is whole. What is whole can't be divided. Now, the special relativity, the equations work out like when there's a massless particle, time doesn't exist. So for the photon, it's all over the place. It has no specified location, yet it does. And it's eternal because it's spread out because it doesn't exist in the special relativity equations. Now, his argument for space not existing is a little bit more fragile. He says the photon doesn't lose energy as it travels through space. As it travels through any kind of material, it doesn't lose energy, or transparent material. It may reflect, it may refract, but it doesn't lose energy as it travels. So he draws the conclusion that space doesn't exist for the photon. So I think it's a fascinating allegory, a fascinating metaphor. The photon being this creator. So he has 3 steps. It's the descent into matter. In the first step, the photon, once eternal, decides to constrain itself to time, and particles are made. And then the next step, it gives up another degree of freedom and it confines itself to space. And in the final step, it confines itself to both time and space. And matter is made. And this is interesting because from there, he has it climbing up to plants, to animals and humans. So plants have 1 degree of freedom. They can either grow up or down. As you go up the evolutionary scale, you got animals and they can move in 2 dimensions. And then humans, who knows the limit of our freedom? Who knows the limit? Another point to his hypothesis is everything came from the photon. So all levels share in this same purpose of creating the universe with light. So all levels contain light. It's really quite a complex theory, a complex hypothesis. But I've tried to boil it down to the most interesting things. So what are your myths, stories, experiences of light? What do you think about this theory of process?
I'm going to say the first time I came across that theory, especially the one where the photon contemplates itself, was with a friend from Quebec who was teaching the Ramses method, quantum physics, so to speak. That's the first time I came across it, and I think that it is noteworthy, especially if you bring it back to the science of mind teaching, because whatever we contemplate, we create. So I found that to be really interesting, you know, but whatever we contemplate, we create. So the photon contemplating itself, and I think that's what I saw. That's what I think I saw on your slide. That everything starts with one photon and it contemplates itself and it just keeps creating and creating and creating until you have so many different variations of itself. And I actually started to write on that last night, you know, about creation and how everything comes from that one substance, that one thing. And it just keeps on creating to the extent that our imaginations can see. And I was doing that in response to Philosophy Saturday, which happens at 10 o'clock, but because of my uncle's funeral, I couldn't attend, so I sent in my views on that, which is everything starts with the one, and the one just continues to contemplate itself until, you know, we human beings assist in that creation through our own contemplation, through our own imaginations, and a lot of things that we imagine usually come into being at some point in time, like the technology that we're now using. I remember the first time I saw things that went into your ear that you could talk through without any wires hanging was on, I think it was Star Trek or Star Wars, one of those shows. And today we have these little pods we just put in our ears and we can hear people all over the world. I also would have seen what we're doing here where we're talking to each other and you can see screens pop up. So whatever we imagine and contemplate, we create. So that made sense to me, you know, the science of mind teaching is the sum total of all teachings if you really examine it from that perspective and put it into practice, because we're made of that same proton, so to speak, you know, that same electrical stuff, and everything that is in it is in us, and therefore we too can create. You know, I mean, I hear you talk about the art, but for me, I just want to go to the bottom line. I contemplate it, I create it. And, you know, this. So rather than go to the arc, I'm going in a straight line, more or less, direct, direct.
Well, it is important.
Complete.
It's important to understand that this that Western science doesn't accept anything about consciousness really. It needs to have a physical basis. Even psychology is based in materialism, the belief that only the physical is real. So it's not like this is really accepted by science, Western science. However, we are, as Carl Sagan said, made of stardust. So we can look at it in a literal manner too.
Karen, I want to suggest that to say that Western science only sees the material is not exactly true anymore, because there are more doctors and scientists and physicists who are now coming to that place of saying, yes, there is something else beyond the physical. We have Bruce Lipton, Deepak Chopra, Melissa Rankin, just to name a few, who are in the medical science arena. And I think there may have been a couple physicists as well who acknowledge that there is an entity that is engineering and making all the stuff happen.
Well, those people are not really.
Don't let us use it in the broad sense of modern science, because I am seeing that shift in consciousness in a lot of areas, science included. I'm seeing that shift.
Well, if you're talking about mainstream science, I'm talking about mainstream Western science.
Okay.
This is not, and mainstream Western, you may have 5% of the scientists. I mean, it's not a large percentage of people that agree with that anything else exists other than the physical world. They're not, I would guess a lot of them would have to be atheists. I think it would have to go along with atheism. I don't know.
Even the atheists
I'm not
believe
sure.
that there's another
I'm
being
not sure if they're
outside.
really, I'm not sure if they're really related,
Yeah.
but
If you bring it down to the nitty-gritty though, Karen, even the atheists believe that there is a supreme being. They may not call it God, they may not call it spirit. But the mere fact that they say I am atheist and I don't believe in it means that they do have some level of belief in that thing that they say they don't believe in.
yeah, it's an interesting quandary. So anybody else about light?
Well, I just want to add my 1 cent. It's not even 2 cents. That this whole theory or hypothesis is all new to me, and it is just mind-boggling to think that everything could have begun with a proton. I mean, so minute.
Photon.
A photon, sorry. I meant photon. Thank you. And yeah, I'm still trying to wrap my head around that.
If you're really interested in it, there's a book called The Reflexive Universe by Arthur Young, and wow, does he get into it. He separates each level of evolution into sub-levels, and it's mind-boggling. But the first few chapters are really give you the idea of what his theory is about, what his hypothesis is about. It hasn't reached the point of theory. I don't think it ever will, but it's really fascinating, at least not in our lifetime.
It's like, how can you know? How can you know that it began with a photon?
I know
Yeah.
it's, see, that's why I say it's best thought of as an analogy. But the interesting thing is, once you get into those levels, they make perfect scientific sense. The only thing that really needs to be adjusted is the idea that the photon can have an intention and that it imploded to start the universe. I mean, those are the things that need adjusting. And then from then on, the science is pretty solid, which is unusual because most of the sciences are pretty obvious about their analogies. In fact, when I first went to school to study physics, I was attracted to it because of this east-west analogy. I thought, oh my gosh, no. I found out within the first couple semesters that no, none of these physicists, I wrote a paper saying Einstein said God doesn't play dice with the universe. And my physics professor wrote, no, physicists don't believe in God. Exclamation point, exclamation point. And of all of my schooling, I think there was one professor who might have, but you know, they have to be kind of closeted because they're not.
I just had like a strange thought. Well, I don't know if it's strange. So my first thought was, how could a photon have consciousness? That seems like a gigantic leap. But then I thought, but wait a minute, I believe God is in everything, and God is consciousness. So, so therefore God is in a photon, and consciousness is in a photon. So I just kind of closed the loop for myself, I think.
Yeah.
Right. Religious science has a lot of panpsychist ideas.
Oh, I had asked you before when we were
Right.
emailing the difference between pantheism and panpsychism, but I can't remember if you answered me. Because to me, pantheism is believing God is in everything.
Yeah, I don't think there's much difference. Panentheism believes God is in everything and a little bit more, and more than everything. But pantheism, I believe, just believes God is in everything, and that's it. I mean, there's not another dimension. So that's what panpsychism is, that God is in everything. There's consciousness, there's matter. This always goes together. So religious science has elements of panpsychism, but it also has elements of idealism, which is the belief that matter is created by the mind. So the reason it has elements of idealism is Does everybody hear my alarm?
No.
Okay,
No.
good.
No, not.
The reason it has elements of idealism is because I need to. Oh,
Funny, just as she said that, I had an alarm go off on my phone.
I'm going to share with you because I looked
well,
it up.
sorry about that. So the reason it has elements of idealism is because idealism, as I said, is believes that matter comes from the mind, originates from the mind, where materialism believes the brain creates matter. I mean, the brain creates consciousness. Idealism believes consciousness creates the brain or creates matter. So in treatment, that is sort of what we're saying. So we have an idealist point of view that matter can be affected by the mind. But we also have the idea that God is in everything there is, which is panpsychism. So we're a little bit of both. Yes, Masako.
Okay. Well, I love the exposure to both the scientific world and the spiritual world, because I personally feel is we are evolving in understanding both part of what we are. And one thing is the cell does his thing subconsciously, and at the same time, it's also very sensitive to our thoughts. And so there is a deep-rooted connection, and I think that's probably one of the reasons why we are able to manifest in the material world our thoughts. The second thing is, I think, well, I'm guessing, like myself, we are all here this morning to evolve, to become better human beings. And so for me, it's always about, again, in harmony, trying to harmonize my humanness with all its emotions and judgments, as well as joy and things that really light me up. And it's about making these two worlds come together so I can live in peace. And I just want to leave with a quote from Course in Miracles. As one of the main goals of that course is that, my God, we can't come home, even though we are already home, but we cannot go home unless we are holding each other's hands and supporting each other, understanding each other, and taking each other home. To me, that's like the end. There's nothing more.
Reminds me of the section in the course that says, how many people are needed to save the world? Do you know the answer? Do you remember the answer? One. Just one person. Think about it. It's really pretty deep. So anyone else have anything to say about light experiences, light myths, light in general, or anything at all?
Just you light up my life.
I saw this cute picture that has all these stars, and I was going to, oh, I have it on my video. I'm going to show it. I'm going to have it on my slides. I will show it to you. Thank you, Sonia. Did you want to say something, Masako?
Yeah, and I just want to acknowledge the work that you had put in to have this presentation work for all of us. Yeah, kudos. And I'm grateful for your hard work. And thank you for sharing it with us and your commitment to the world. It's so apparent. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to show you the last part of my screen. So if you'd like to contact Rebecca about the virtual practitioner program, there's her email and there are my emails. And I invite you to just close your eyes for a few minutes and think about light. Imagine you are light. Surround yourself with light. Feel that light, be that light. Know that light is you right at this instant. Relax in that light. I'll leave you for a few minutes, for a minute. So knowing that you are light, always, now, forever, eternally, you are light. Gradually bring yourself back to the room. Wiggle your toes and your fingers. Move around and open your eyes when you are ready. Next week, Sonia Hart, who is here today, will be speaking. And here's the slide that I love. I found this old picture of us all shining together.
I love that. Makes my heart smile. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Karen. This was really beautiful. Thank you, everybody.
So
Where'd
how
you
about
find
if
that
I
star?
All of you,
Rebecca,
Katrina.
that star isn't in my reactions. Where'd you find that?
Oh, if you go to reactions and then you go to the dot
The more.
reactions, it'll let you look up all the reactions that
Okay, I've never gone that far. I knew it was there. I
Yeah.
just never did that.
I know it's kind of
Cool.
fun. You can put on different things.
Ah, all right, show off.
I love it. So I will do a short benediction unless Joni, would you like to pray us out?
Oh, if you feel comfortable, close your eyes and know that God is good and God is light, and so are we. All is well. Thank you. Bye-bye. And so it is.